picture of this, so. Yeah. Everybody say hi. All right. Right? Okay. I'm hoping that we don't have any audio problems. The last couple of weeks, I've stepped on the cord. And the only reason we use the mic is to record onto the video. And haha, I'm not on the video.
But I know what you're doing. And I will squeal like a pig. I hear them. You're dueling banjo.
All right. Let me get my notes up here.
Yes, yes.
Okay. We are going to have a very interesting conversation today. For over a year, I have been studying and trying to figure out who this gentleman is. He's only mentioned twice in the Bible. Does anybody have an idea who that might be? Melchizedek, or Melchizedek. He's a very interesting character when we put him into the whole scheme of the Abrahamic story and the story of Jesus. If I can get my Bible out here, which I forgot to unzip, would you be so kind? Right? Yeah, I got a couple of note things in there too. Here we go. Maybe. It's not usual that I actually bring out my Bible because it's cumbersome without having a table to put it on. But, here we go. It says, in Psalms 110, it said, "The Lord said to my Lord, sit in honor at my right hand until I humble your enemies. Make them footstools under your feet. The Lord will extend your powerful dominion from Jerusalem. You will rule over your enemies in that day of battle, and your people will serve you willingly, arrayed in holy garments. Your vigor will be renewed each day like the morning dew. The Lord has taken an oath and will not break his vow. You are a priest forever in the line of Melchizedek." Now, the only other place that he is mentioned is right here. And I'm not going to read the entire chapter, but there's a couple of things in here. It says, "This Melchizedek was king of the city of Salem, also a priest of God Most High, when Abraham was returning after winning a great battle. Then Abraham took a tenth of all he had won and gave it to Melchizedek. His name means King of Peace." Where have we heard that before? Who else is called the King of Peace? Jesus, that's right. So, now it says, and listen to this carefully. There is no record of a father. There is no record of a mother. There is no genealogy. And there is no end to his life. Are we confused? Does it sound like someone else we know? But yet, he is to remain a priest forever, resembling God. Now, when Christ comes along, we're in Hebrews here. So when Christ comes along, Christ is compared in chapter 7, verse 15. Christ is compared to Melchizedek. And it says, the change in God's law is even more evident from the fact that a different priest who is like Melchizedek has now come. He became a priest not by meeting the old requirements of belonging to the tribe of Levi, but by the power of life that cannot be destroyed. And the psalmist pointed this out when he talked of Christ. You are a priest forever in the line of Melchizedek. So what do we have here? Do we have someone maybe that is purporting to be another son of God? Or do we have another son of God? This has stumped scholars for years and centuries. Because this is the only place that he's mentioned, there's no historical evidence except for that he was here on earth. We don't know where he came from. We don't know how he left the earth. But he was here. And he was the high priest resembling God. And then later on, of course, like I said, Jesus is likened to Melchizedek. So, as I've been studying this through the year, I come across a couple of things. And it's not often taught, but let me get to my notes here. It is working. You're not supposed to hear it. Right, yeah. Yeah, the only reason we use it is for the recording. And I'm hoping, I'm going to try this week. Okay. I gotta find it. It's here somewhere. There's several books that are not a part of the canonical Bible. We know of those books, right? The Gospel of Judas Iscariot, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. I am not going to sit here and say that those books weren't put, or they, according to the Jewish Council, they were put out of the canon because they didn't quite correspond to what was in there. I've been reading the Gospel of Judas, and I've been comparing it to the Bible, and again, we have a story of two different proportions. In the Gospel of Judas, Judas is Benjamin Iscariot's father. Judas actually tells his son his life story. So we got an eyewitness account here, or instead of tale after tale handed down, we have one story of a man's life given to his son to put down on paper. And there is proof of this in 2001. They actually published it. It's gone through many scholars, and it's discovered to have a lot of scientific and historical evidence that relates to what Judas is saying. So here again, we have somebody who, according to the canon, is not who he is. So how do we get things like this? If we figured that the Bible was originally written in Aramaic, and then it was translated into Coptic Egyptian, and then it was translated into the Greek, and then it was translated into the Hebrew, and finally into the English. Right? So within these different translations, things have kind of not so much God's error, because God gave the original works, but human error has mistranslated so many things that people purport that the Bible itself cannot be true. I don't believe that. I believe the Bible is true. However, I believe, as I've said many, many times, not in blind faith. God gave us a brain. go back and do the research, and you're going to find things that were not taught today. So, going back to Melchizedek, the theories, even in the Christian scholars' world, is that Melchizedek was a created Son of God. Jesus is called a begotten Son of God, the only begotten Son of God. Begotten means to have been sired. So, somehow, God touched Mary, and Mary conceived this child that was sired by God. You really got to have a lot of faith to believe the way the story is written. But that's what it says, and until I find further evidence that that's not the case, that's what I go with. So, Melchizedek is this created son. He is the predecessor to Jesus. But the one thing that Melchizedek cannot do is provide for our salvation. That was not his purpose. Melchizedek taught the... Wow, it's windy out here. Melchizedek taught the rules of God. He taught the sanctity of God, and he taught the coming of Jesus. But
Somebody's not liking what you're saying, honey.
yeah, I know. So the one thing that Melchizedek could not do, because he was a created being, was die and bleed. Because he was a spiritual being, he was not, even though he had human form, he was not born. Therefore, he was not human. So, the Christian scholars truly believe that he was a son of God. He just simply, as I said, was a created son of God, not a born son of God. As Jesus is the only begotten Son of God, as it says in John 3:16, for God so loved the world, he sent his only begotten Son, that all should not perish, but come to him and have everlasting life. So how do we work in those of us who are not scholars, and we're not really taught about this person, how do we work this into our belief system, our thoughts? It's taken me a year to even come to half a conclusion. So if I'm saying this to you today, what would you tell me? I have a lot of looks today. Frozen logs? Come on, people, participate. That's the way we do things. So if I walked up to you, Phil, let's say having been raised in a Christian environment and never hearing the story of Melchizedek, and here I am telling you something that, even though it's in here, has never been shown to you, has never been talked about. What are you going to tell me?
I'd say there.
Most of us are going to say, well, if it's in there, and I'm going to tell you, if you don't believe me, do the research. Okay? I'm not up here to tell you things you know. That is not the purpose of my messages. The purpose of my messages are to tell you the truths that have become so adulterated within the Christian denominations, the Catholic denominations, because of all the translations. Does that make sense? In Greek, there is no word for every single phrase in Hebrew. In Hebrew, there's no word for every single phrase in Greek. In Aramaic, there is not